Juliet Ortega hadn't had a warm meal in over 48 hours. It was New Year's Eve, and the only thing colder than the icy wind outside was the silence in her soul. She pulled her worn coat tighter around her shoulders, the lining long since torn, and ushered her 5-year-old twins into the corner booth of a dim, half-empty diner in the bad part of Chicago. She only had $15. Not 15 and some change. Exactly 15. The waitress didn't meet her eyes as she slid the sticky laminated menus onto the table. Juliet could already feel the panic rising in her throat as her eyes scanned the prices. Nothing added up. Everything was too much. A kid's meal, even just one, would eat half her money. "Don't ask for dessert," she said softly. The twins, Miguel and Lila, nodded like little soldiers. They had learned what silence meant, what sacrifice looked like. Miguel's sweater was 2 sizes too small, and Lila's shoes had cardboard stuffed in the soles. They still smiled at her. They still thought their mom could fix things. She couldn't even fix breakfast. Juliet hadn't always lived like this. A year ago, she was still married, still stable, still standing, but cancer didn't care about savings accounts or life plans. Juliet's husband Marco died 7 months ago after a brutal, short battle that left her with a mountain of medical debt and a funeral she couldn't afford. She pawned her wedding ring, sold the TV, then the car, then the house. The creditors didn't blink. They just kept calling, and when she couldn't pay, they sent others. Darker men. Men who didn't bother with suits and ties. Men who didn't use last names. One of them had whispered in her ear last month as her kids cried in the bedroom. "Debts don't die with the man, sweetheart. They pass on like inheritance." She ran that same night, changed numbers, moved 3 towns over, started cleaning houses under the table for cash. All she had left was the $15 in her pocket and the desperate wish to give her kids one small memory of normal before the year ended. "Can we get fries?" Leila asked softly. "Let me check, baby," Juliet whispered, doing math in her head like it might save her life. She decided on a plate of pancakes to split between the kids. Maybe one small soda. She wouldn't eat. She didn't need to. Just watching them take a bite without fear of someone banging on the door was enough. The waitress came back. She didn't judge. She'd seen people like Juliet before. 2 kids' pancakes, 1 soda, no refills, no food for me, Juliet said. The woman nodded slowly. "You sure, hon?" Juliet smiled tight. "Yes." Then the door opened, and the entire room changed. He walked in like he owned silence. Tall, broad shoulders under a black overcoat, hands in leather gloves. A faint scar ran along the line of his jaw. Behind him came 2 men, dressed just as darkly, scanning the room like they'd done it 100 times before. People looked away. Even the waitress froze halfway to the kitchen. Juliet felt every nerve in her body go stiff. She knew who he was. Dante Lucero, the name whispered in alleys. The kind of man you didn't make eye contact with if you wanted to keep your kneecaps. The Mafia boss who, rumor had it, turned his empire bloody after his own brother was shot by a traitor. Juliet had only ever heard his name on accident, in conversations not meant for her ears when she cleaned certain houses. And now he was 5 feet away from her table. Miguel leaned into her. "Mama, is he bad?" "No," she whispered, lying, just quiet. Dante walked slowly past their table, his eyes scanning the room. But as he passed, he stopped. His gaze dropped to the plate of pancakes being cut into precise little halves by Lila and Miguel. His eyes trailed up, locking with Juliet's. It was only for a second. But it was only for a second. She flinched like he'd hit her. Like her whole body remembered every threat, every shadow, every knock on the motel door. He nodded once, then moved to the far booth facing the entire diner. His men flanked him silently. The air returned to the room, barely. The waitress delivered the food. Juliet thanked her, her voice shaking. The kids ate, she didn't. And across the room, Dante Lucero didn't stop watching her. Juliet tried not to look, but she could feel his eyes. Every bite Miguel and Lila took felt exposed. Her hand shook each time she lifted the napkin to wipe their mouths. She kept her gaze locked on them, refusing to glance up. She didn't need trouble. Not from a man like him, not tonight, not there. She'd already been through enough hell this year. But when the waitress returned, something changed. Instead of walking straight to Juliet's table, she took a sharp turn and headed to the booth in the back, to him. Mr. Lucero, she said quietly, respectfully. Coffee, came the reply. Calm, low, the kind of voice that made you sit straighter without knowing why. And he paused, then looked up, eyes flicking directly to Juliet's table. Whatever the kids are eating, bring another set, with extra syrup. Juliet's heart stopped. The waitress hesitated. You want it sent to my table, he interrupted. She can stay where she is, just bring it. Juliet blinked. What? No, that's not. She started to rise. Don't, the waitress said gently, stepping closer. He wasn't asking. He's not that kind of man. Juliet sat back down slowly, her face burning with confusion and something dangerously close to shame. Was this pity? Was she a charity case now? Was this a warning? A subtle message from a man who saw too much? The second plate arrived, larger than the first, with a side of sausage links and a second soda. Juliet's stomach growled. Leela's eyes lit up. Mama, we can share. No, Juliet said quickly, trying to smile. You two eat? I'm fine. But the waitress leaned down again, placing something beside Juliet's hand. A third plate, loaded. Boss said you're not invisible, she whispered. He said don't argue. Juliet stared at the plate, her throat tightening. The food smelled like heaven. Butter and sugar and warm syrup. She hadn't had a full meal in days. Now there was more than enough. She glanced toward the back booth. Dante Lucero wasn't watching anymore. He was drinking his coffee, flipping through something on his phone, as if this was normal, as if feeding strangers in diners was just part of his day. She didn't know what to think, until the door opened again, and everything stopped. 3 men walked in. Leather jackets, beards, hard eyes. Juliet's heart plunged. She knew them, not by name, not exactly. But she remembered the taller one's laugh, remembered the smirk of the shorter man when he took her last 50 from her trembling hands outside that shelter. She remembered the middle one pointing at Leela and saying, maybe she can work it off when she's older. She remembered the fear. Now they were here, in the same diner. Juliet's blood turned to ice. Her hands reached across the table, pulling her kids closer instinctively. The men hadn't seen her yet. They were laughing, slapping each other's backs, heading to the counter. One of them glanced around and froze. His eyes met hers. Recognition, and a slow, ugly smile. Juliet's legs itched to run. She couldn't move. She couldn't breathe. Mama? Miguel whispered. Juliet opened her mouth. Nothing came out, but behind her a chair scraped. Dante Lucero stood, not in a rush. Not loud. But every movement in the diner ceased. Forks stopped mid-air. Conversations died. Even the 3 men turned as one to look at him. Dante walked slowly across the floor, the quiet echo of his shoes the only sound in the room. He stopped between the 2 booths. Juliet's and the men who had hunted her. The one who'd smiled at her stood up. We got a problem, boss, he asked, tone mocking. Dante didn't answer. He looked at Juliet, then at her twins, then back to the men. He pointed at the one with the smile. Your name? The man frowned. Trev. Dante nodded. Then he hit him. Hard. No wind-up. No wind-up. No warning. Just a flash of motion, and Trev hit the floor with a crack, blood streaming from his nose. The diner screamed into chaos, but Dante didn't blink. He pointed to the second man, who was frozen in place. You, he said calmly, do you collect for Marcone? The man's mouth flapped uselessly. He nodded. Dante's voice dropped lower. Did Marcone authorize you to follow a widow and threaten her children? Juliet gasped. He knew. The man stammered. We were just collecting. You were stealing, Dante interrupted coldly, and doing it under a flag that doesn't belong to you. The third man tried to run. He made it 3 steps. Then one of Dante's men, who no one even saw move, blocked the exit and slammed him against the glass with such force the windows rattled. The diner was silent again. Not with fear. With awe. Dante looked back at Juliet, his expression softened for a split second. Then he turned back to the 3 terrified men. These are my streets, he said, almost gently, and this family is now under my name. He paused. If I see you within 10 blocks of them again, you won't walk out. No one moved. Now get the hell out." The 3 men scrambled like cockroaches, dragging Trev's bleeding body behind them. The bell over the door jingled as it slammed shut, and just like that, it was over. Dante walked back to his table. He picked up his coffee and took a sip, as if nothing happened. Juliet stared at him. He didn't look back, but he said, just loud enough for her to hear, "Finish your food." Juliet's hand was still trembling as she reached for her fork. Miguel and Leela were frozen in place, wide-eyed, watching the door like the bad men might come back. Juliet leaned forward and pulled both of them close, pressing a kiss to their cheeks. "They're gone," she whispered, trying to keep her voice steady. "They're not coming back." She didn't believe it. Not really. Not yet. But when she looked back toward the corner booth and saw Dante Lucero sitting there like nothing had happened, something shifted in her chest. Not fear. Not quite safety either. Something else. Power. The kind of power that makes monsters run. The kind of power that had turned a cold, cracked diner into a courtroom. And he had been the judge. Juliet hadn't spoken to him. Hadn't thanked him. Hadn't even wanted his attention. And yet here she was, with warm food in front of her, her children safe, and the men who had been hunting her bleeding in the street. She picked up the fork. Her hand still shook. She took one bite. And then another. Dante didn't glance her way again. Not once. But 15 minutes later, when he stood and slid on his overcoat, the waitress appeared at Juliet's table. "He said you're not paying," she said softly. Juliet blinked, but the woman cut her off. "He also said you should stop arguing with people who scare God." She placed a folded piece of paper next to Juliet's plate. Juliet hesitated, then opened it. Inside was a room number, a name of a motel. 3 blocks away, paid for, 7 nights. Written in clean, block letters beneath it. "You're not alone anymore. Rest." No signature. No phone number. Just that. Juliet stared at it, her throat tightening. She looked up, but he was already gone. The booth sat empty. The bell above the door still swayed slightly from where he'd walked out. She looked down at her kids. Miguel had syrup on his cheek. Leela's head was resting on the table, eyes drooping, her belly finally full. Juliet closed her hand over the note. She didn't know what just happened. Didn't know why a man like Dante Lucero would care about someone like her. But something deep in her bones, the same instinct that had told her to run the night the debt collectors smiled at her daughters, told her this wasn't a favor, this was a line drawn, and now she was behind it. Juliet stood up slowly, helping the kids out of the booth. The waitress brought her the leftover food in a brown paper bag and a second small envelope tucked quietly inside. "For breakfast tomorrow," she said with a wink. Juliet nodded, whispered a thank you, and stepped out into the cold. The wind bit at her cheeks. Snow drifted across the cracked sidewalk, but she didn't shiver. She looked down the street. A black car sat idling near the corner. Not moving, watching, but not threatening. Juliet didn't need to guess. She knew. Dante Lucero was making sure they made it to that motel. She adjusted the strap of her bag, took Miguel and Leela's hands, and walked toward the lights ahead. Every step she took away from that diner felt like a chapter closing. The year was ending, and for the first time in months, Juliet Ortega wasn't scared of the next one. She didn't know where it would go or what it would cost, but she knew this much. Someone dangerous had chosen her side, and dangerous people don't make empty promises. The motel wasn't fancy. Peeling paint, flickering sign, a lobby that smelt faintly of cigarettes and desperation. But to Juliet, it was heaven. The girl at the front desk barely looked up as she slid over a keycard. Room 108. Already paid in full. Juliet didn't ask by who. She already knew. She guided Miguel and Leela down the narrow hallway, past rooms where voices murmured behind closed doors and televisions buzzed through thin walls. The hallway was warm. That alone made her chest tighten. They reached 108, and Juliet's hand paused over the handle. For months, she'd opened doors with dread in her chest, wondering if someone had followed her, if someone was waiting, if tonight would be the night everything finally crumbled. But this door? This one didn't feel like that. She swiped the card. It clicked open with a soft beep. And the moment she stepped inside, the tears came. There were 2 queen beds, real pillows, a bathroom with a stack of fresh towels, a heater humming steadily in the corner, and on the table by the window, 2 small gift bags, blue tissue paper peeking out the top. Lila gasped, "Mama, presents!" Miguel darted forward, already reaching inside one. "Is this for us?" Juliet couldn't answer, her throat was too tight. Inside the bags were 2 fleece jackets, one pink, one navy blue. Warm gloves, socks, a coloring book with crayons, a small toy car, a soft plush bunny, and at the bottom of each bag a small card. "Happy New Year. From someone who sees you. No name." Just that. Juliet sank down on the edge of the bed, her hands covering her mouth. Her heart was breaking and mending at the same time. No one had done something kind for her in so long, it didn't even feel real. She hadn't felt seen in months. But someone had noticed. Someone who lived in the shadows, who spoke in silence and walked like a storm. A man with blood on his hands and steel in his veins, and he had chosen to protect her. The broken widow. The invisible woman in the corner booth. The mother who thought she'd run out of miracles. Miguel climbed up beside her and curled into her side. "Is it okay to sleep, Mama?" Juliet pressed a kiss to his forehead. "Yes, baby, it's okay." Lila was already curled up with the bunny on the other bed, her eyes fluttering closed. Juliet pulled a blanket over her, then returned to Miguel, holding him close. She lay there for a long time, eyes wide in the dark, listening to the heater hum and her children breathe. No sirens. No pounding footsteps. No fear. It felt wrong at first, like she'd forgotten something, but slowly that feeling faded, and peace, real, painful, aching peace, crept in. Outside, a black car sat under a flickering streetlight. Its engine idled quietly. A man leaned back in the driver's seat, watching the motel window. Waiting. Guarding. The boss had said one thing before they left the diner. No one touches her again, ever. And when Dante Lucero made a promise, the city listened. Morning came softly. Golden sunlight spilled through the thin motel curtains, touching everything in a hazy, quiet warmth. Juliet blinked awake slowly, disoriented for just a moment before it all came rushing back. The diner, the men, the booze, him. Dante Lucero. She sat up in bed, careful not to wake Miguel, who had his little face buried into her side, snoring gently. Across the room, Lila was still wrapped up like a burrito, the stuffed bunny tucked tightly under her chin. It was quiet. No yelling from the hallway. No footsteps pounding above them. No fear curling in her chest like a coiled wire. Just quiet. Juliet slid out of bed, grabbed the key card and stepped outside for a moment of air. The cold hit her cheeks, sharp but fresh. The world looked different somehow. Still run down, still chipped paint and rusted street signs, but not threatening. She glanced toward the street. There it was, a different black car today, parked neatly under the telephone pole. A man behind the wheel wearing sunglasses even though it was still early, not moving, not waving. Just there, watching. Juliet exhaled slowly and went back inside. By the time the twins woke up, she had already heated some oatmeal in the microwave and laid out their new gloves and coats. "Mama," Lila said, slipping her arms into the pink sleeves, "do we get to keep these?" Juliet knelt in front of her. "Yeah, baby, you do. Is that man gonna come back?" Miguel asked, climbing up onto the chair. "The one in the black coat?" Juliet hesitated, then nodded. "I don't think he ever really left." The kids ate quietly, and Juliet packed up what little they had. A single bag with clothes, toothpaste, a plastic comb, that was all. That was everything. At 10 sharp, there was a knock on the motel door. Not loud, just 2 quiet taps. Juliet's stomach tightened. She told the kids to stay put, then crossed the room and looked through the peephole. It was the waitress from the diner. She blinked in surprise, opened the door. "Hey, hon," the woman said, holding a small white envelope. "He asked me to drop this off. Said you'd need it today." Juliet took the envelope slowly. "He?" The woman just gave her a look. "You know who." Then she turned and walked back to her car, without another word. Juliet closed the door, sat on the edge of the bed, and opened the envelope. Inside was a single note, typed, clipped to a debit card. "Juliet, there's $1,000 on this card. It's clean. No strings, just a start. At 1 p.m. there's an apartment waiting for you. 2 bedrooms, paid up for the next 2 months. Safe neighborhood, quiet neighbors. No eyes, address 1125 E. Ringer Street, Unit 3B. Show this card to the property manager. It's already arranged. You don't owe me. You don't belong to anyone. This is just balance. D. L. Juliet stared at the note until her vision blurred. She didn't want to cry again, but her body didn't care. The tears came hot and fast, not just from relief. From the weight of it, from being seen. From the burden that was finally being lifted. Not with promises or pity, but with action. She didn't understand why he was doing this. Couldn't, but part of her stopped questioning it. Because after all she'd survived, she'd learned to recognize something rare. Truth with no catch. Juliet folded the letter and slid it into her bag. She looked at her children, her reason, her world. "Come on," she said, her voice stronger now. "Let's go see our new home." Miguel jumped up, already grabbing the bag. "Are there bunk beds?" Lila gasped. "Can we get a cat?" Juliet laughed, the real kind. "Let's just get a front door with a lock first, okay?" They walked out of the motel an hour later. The same man in the black car didn't get out, didn't say a word, but he followed at a slow, silent distance. Juliet didn't mind. It wasn't surveillance. It was protection. And for the first time in a long, long time, she welcomed it. Juliet stared up at the apartment building like it was a castle. It wasn't grand. It wasn't new. The bricks were old and weathered. The stairs creaked a little and the railings needed paint. But it was clean. There were flower pots in a few windows. A tricycle left carelessly near the entrance. And best of all, it smelled like home. Detergent, cooking. The faint trace of someone baking bread upstairs. Lila clutched Juliet's hand. "Is this it?" Juliet nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "This is it, baby." Miguel was already bounding up the steps, the sleeves of his jacket flapping as he ran. "Come on, let's find 3B. The property manager met them at the door, a balding, quiet man with a tucked-in polo shirt and the look of someone who didn't ask too many questions. "Card?" he asked. Juliet handed it over. He glanced at it, nodded once, and gestured toward the stairs. "Top of the landing? Already furnished? He said you'd need a stocked fridge. You'll find everything." Juliet didn't ask who he was. At this point, she already knew, and strangely, it no longer scared her. It grounded her. She took her kids' hands and climbed the stairs. Unit 3B was at the end of the hall. She unlocked the door, and it opened with a soft click, and then her knees buckled. Because this was not what she expected. It wasn't fancy, no chandeliers or marble. But it was warm, lived in, real. The living room had a couch that didn't sag, a TV mounted on the wall, a small round dining table with 4 chairs. There were 2 bedrooms, one with a queen bed, soft gray sheets, and a closet with clean towels already folded on the shelf. The second room had bunk beds. Pink comforters, a bookshelf with a few worn but carefully chosen storybooks, a box of toys in the corner. Miguel and Lila screamed. "Bunk beds!" Miguel climbed a ladder in seconds. Lila crawled into the bottom bunk and hugged the plush unicorn waiting there. "Mama, look what's in the drawers," she said. Juliet walked over, barely holding herself together. Inside the drawer, new socks, pajamas, little slippers, all in the right sizes. It was like someone had seen them, knew them, cared enough to prepare. She stepped into the kitchen next. The fridge buzzed softly, fully stocked. Milk, eggs, fruit, even juice boxes. The cabinets held cereal, rice, cans of soup, pasta, and on the counter was a sealed white envelope. No name on the front. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was another note, written in Dante Lucero's calm, efficient print. "Juliet, this is yours now. No rent for 2 months. Utility bills covered. You'll find a phone on the kitchen counter with 1 number saved. Use it if you need anything. There's a card for groceries in the drawer, refilled weekly. A friend of mine at a local school has been notified. The twins have spots. Starts Monday. You're not just surviving anymore, you're rebuilding. No one will touch you again. Not while I draw breath. D. L. Juliet pressed the paper to her lips and sobbed. Not from fear. Not from sorrow. From relief. From the crushing, overwhelming release of carrying everything alone for too long. She didn't know this man, not really. But he'd done more for her in 72 hours than anyone had done in years. He had given her life back, bit by bit, room by room, safety, warmth, dignity. And he hadn't asked for a damn thing in return, just silence, just peace. Juliet stood in the doorway of her children's new bedroom, watching them play, listening to their laughter bounce off the walls. She exhaled slowly. She wasn't running anymore. She wasn't hiding. She was home. And somewhere out there, in the cold corners of the city, the man in the black coat was still moving through the dark, making sure she stayed safe, making sure that the people who hunted mothers and fed off the weak were learning, one by one, what it meant to break the wrong woman. It had been a week. 7 full days since Juliet and her children stepped into apartment 3B. 7 mornings waking up without dread. 7 nights where no one knocked, no one shouted, no one threatened. Each day had been a gift. Quiet. Almost surreal. She cooked pancakes the first morning, burned them a little, but Lila said they were the best pancakes in the world. Miguel poured syrup over everything, including his hand, and giggled like a child who had finally forgotten fear. The school enrollment had gone smoothly. The principal, a soft-spoken woman with silver hair, greeted Juliet with a warm handshake and said, "Mr. Lucero said you might stop by." That had made Juliet pause. He'd already spoken to them? She wasn't sure how to feel about that. But when she saw the classroom, saw the cheerful murals and the way Lila instantly gravitated to the bookshelves, it didn't matter. Her children were finally getting a chance. She got a job too, unexpectedly. It started with a walk. She was exploring the neighborhood, just trying to clear her head while the twins were at school. On the corner of Rainer and Pine was a small flower shop. The kind you don't notice at first. Tucked between a bakery and a dry cleaner, the windows dusty, the door creaky. Inside it smelled like roses and eucalyptus and earth. An older woman stood behind the counter, arranging tulips with slow, careful hands. Juliet had only come in to browse, to pretend, maybe, to feel normal. But the woman had studied her for a moment, said, "You have quiet hands, the kind that knows how to hold broken things without crushing them." Juliet blinked. I clean houses." "You want work?" the woman asked. Juliet hesitated, then nodded. The woman didn't ask about her past, didn't ask for a resume. She just pulled out an apron and handed it over. "You start now." Juliet started crying before she could stop herself. She didn't know if he had arranged this too. Dante Lucero. There was no sign of it. No envelope. No one watching from a car that day, but still, part of her wondered. Back at the apartment that night, after the twins were asleep, Juliet found herself standing in the living room. Just standing. Holding the phone Dante left behind, her fingers hovered over the single saved number. She wasn't sure why. She didn't need anything. She wasn't in trouble. But there was something pressing behind her ribs, something building all week. She wanted to say thank you, not the kind of thank you you throw over your shoulder, the kind that meant, "You saved me before I broke completely." She dialed. It rang once, twice. Then a voice, calm, low, steady. Juliet. He knew it was her. She froze. The room suddenly felt smaller. "Hi," she said softly. "I didn't mean to bother you. I needed to hear your voice, I think." There was a pause. Then, "Is everything all right?" "Yes. Yes, it's more than all right. I have a job, the kids are happy. I think they're starting to forget how it used to feel. And She hesitated. "Go on," he said. "I just don't understand. Why me? Why now? You didn't know me. You didn't owe me anything." There was silence on the other end, long enough to make her think he'd hung up. But then he spoke. "When I was young," Dante said, "my mother was alone, my father was gone, and men like the ones who followed you, they came to our door too. They didn't just take what little we had. They took her hope, bit by bit." Juliet's breath caught. "I couldn't stop them then," he continued. "I was just a kid. I swore when I had power, I'd never let it happen again. And then I saw you." His voice softened. "Your coat, your hands, the way you didn't touch your food. The way your kids leaned into you like you were the last safe place they knew. I knew that look. I saw her again. I saw my mother." Juliet's throat closed. "You reminded me," Dante said, "of the promise I made to no one but myself. That the next time the world tried to crush someone like you, I'd be the hand that stopped it." She didn't speak. She couldn't. Do you understand now? He asked. Juliet nodded, even though he couldn't see it. I do. Another pause. You don't owe me anything, Juliet, he said. You never did. She wiped her face. Then why do I feel like I do? Because you're not used to people protecting you without wanting something in return. But that's not what this is. She whispered. Then what is it? A correction, Dante said. A line in the sand. You were on your knees when we met. Now you're standing again. That's all I ever wanted. Juliet closed her eyes. Thank you. You don't need to say it. I wanted to. A faint exhale on the line, almost a chuckle. Get some rest, Juliet. I'll be nearby. The call ended. Juliet held the phone to her chest for a long moment before setting it back on the table. She looked around her apartment. The light from the street filtering through the curtains, the soft hum of the heater, the quiet breathing of her daughters asleep in their room. She didn't know what Dante Lucero truly was, a monster, a guardian, both. But he had drawn a line, and she was on the right side of it now. Finally, 3 months later, spring came early. The trees on Renner Street bloomed with soft pinks and pale greens, like even nature had decided it was time to let something good grow again. Juliet stood by the kitchen window, coffee in hand, watching Leila and Miguel chase each other across the small park across the street. Their laughter echoed bright and clear, not cautious, not afraid. They were thriving. The apartment had become a real home, messy, loud, alive. Finger-painted art covered the fridge, shoes were scattered at the door. A crack in the hallway ceiling had been patched by a maintenance man who didn't ask questions. Juliet's shifts at the flower shop had increased. Mrs. Gale, her quiet boss, now trusted her to close the store alone. Customers asked for her. She'd learned which flowers meant I'm sorry and which ones meant don't come back. She hadn't seen Dante Lucero since the night she called him. Not in person. But every time she walked outside, she felt it. The presence, subtle but constant, like a net was around her and the kids, one she didn't see, but no one dared step through. Sometimes it was the black car parked half a block down. Sometimes it was a man on a bench pretending to read a newspaper. Once, when a strange man lingered outside her building too long, he simply vanished. No confrontation, no scene. Gone. Juliet didn't ask questions. She no longer needed to. The phone Dante gave her had never rung, except once on Miguel's birthday. Just a short text message. Tell him happy birthday. Check the hallway. She did, and found a box. Inside, a soccer ball, size 4, a small set of goalie gloves, a folded note that said, for the boy who still believes he can win. Let's keep it that way. Juliet cried for an hour. She never replied. But Dante didn't need replies. He was still watching, still protecting, not hovering, just there, like gravity, silent, powerful, inescapable. That night, Juliet sat on the balcony, a blanket over her lap, and stared out at the quiet street. She'd been thinking a lot lately about what it meant to be safe, what it meant to belong. Dante Lucero was a dangerous man. She'd accepted that. He ran a world she didn't understand, the kind of world that moved bodies and bent rules and silenced threats with finality. But she also knew this. The world she lived in needed men like him, at least once, just once, to step in, to draw the line where no one else would. She thought about calling him again, just to say thank you, just to tell him she was okay. But she didn't have to, because downstairs on the other side of the street, the black car flashed its headlights once, just once, like a nod, like a message. I'm here, that's enough. She smiled, a real, quiet smile. Then she went inside to tuck her children into bed. Leila was already asleep, the stuffed unicorn still tucked under her arm. Miguel was fighting to stay awake, holding his new soccer ball against his chest. Did we win today, Mama? He mumbled. Juliet brushed his hair back from his forehead. Yes, baby, we did. And she meant it. She turned off the lights, stepped out into the living room, and looked once more at the phone Dante gave her. It glowed softly in the dark. She didn't call, but she picked it up and typed one message, not because she owed him, but because she wanted him to know. We're okay. We're home. Thank you. No response came, But the next morning, outside her door, a single white tulip lay on the welcome mat. No note, no signature, just a flower that meant in every language of flowers she'd come to know, forgiveness, new beginnings, peace. Juliet picked it up with shaking fingers, held it to her chest, and finally let go of the last piece of fear that had lived inside her since the night her world shattered. Because whatever the world thought of Dante Lesgros, criminal, kingpin, ghost in a black coat, to her, he was the man who turned a nightmare into a second chance. The man who chose not to look away. The man who didn't ask for gratitude, only justice. He had ended the hunt, and in its place planted safety, real, ruthless, unshakable. And maybe that was the truest kind of mercy.